$1 million sat on the counter of a burned-out railroad diner. All Mara Wexley had to do was sign her name and hand over the truth beneath Platform 9. She was broke, jobless, and her brother was already in danger. The man offering the money knew every wound in her life and exactly where to press. But under that forgotten platform, Mara had found her father's voice on an old tape. He hadn't run from his family. Someone had buried what he was trying to prove. Stay with this story and tell me after. Would you take the money or turn the light back on? Mara Wexley was evicted on a Wednesday, fired on a Friday, and by Sunday morning she was driving north with everything she owned rattling in the back of a dying SUV. The boxes behind her held almost nothing worth keeping. 3 pairs of jeans, her mother's wool scarf, a stack of unpaid medical bills, a cracked electric kettle, and a yellow notebook filled with phone numbers she could no longer bear to call. At 29, Mara had already learned that disaster rarely arrived like thunder. More often it came quietly, in envelopes, in missed calls, in the polite voice of a supervisor saying, "Maybe you need time away from emergency dispatch." Time away. That was what they called it after the blizzard call. Mara still heard the old woman's breathing through the headset, still heard the wind battering the caller's windows somewhere outside Miles City, still remembered saying, "Stay with me, Mom," while the line filled with static and the rescue crew lost the road in whiteout snow. The woman had not stayed. After that, Mara began freezing during calls. Her hands shook over the keyboard. She missed details. She apologized too much. Then she lost the job. Her mother, Lorna, had died 8 months earlier from a lung disease that left behind more bills than memories Mara could safely touch. Her younger brother, Caleb, had walked out of a treatment center 2 weeks ago and called only when he needed money or when panic made him sound 12 years old again. So when Mara found the foreclosure listing for Blue Lantern Diner in Harrow Bend, Montana, she did not see a business opportunity. She saw a roof. The photograph showed a long, low diner beside an abandoned railroad platform, its blue sign hanging crooked, its windows clouded by dust, its parking lot split by weeds. The price was low enough to feel like a trap. Mara bought it anyway. By late afternoon, she reached Harrow Bend under a hard, pale sky. The town sat between brown hills and distant snow-bright mountains, small enough that every building seemed to know every other building's secrets. A gas station, a feed store, a laundromat with 2 broken machines, a bank made of red brick, and beyond the last street, the old railroad line cut through the valley like a scar no one had bothered to heal. Blue Lantern Diner stood beside it, exactly as ruined as promised. Mara stopped the SUV and gripped the steering wheel. For one strange second, she wanted to turn around. Then she remembered she had nowhere to turn back to inside. The diner smelled of cold grease, old vinyl, mouse droppings, and dust. The counter was still there, long and faded, with round stools bolted to the floor. A jukebox leaned in one corner like a drunk uncle. The kitchen tiles were cracked. The ceiling sagged above the dish station. Mara set her mother's scarf on the counter. "Home," she said. The word sounded so thin that she almost laughed. She spent the next hour unloading boxes. When she found the envelope from the bank, she checked the paperwork again, trying to convince herself she had not made the worst decision of her life. Property included diner structure, rear storage shed, parking lot, and adjoining service strip. No basement, no platform access, no underground structure, just enough legal language to make emptiness sound official. At the bank, the woman behind the desk had looked at Mara's ID, then at the property file, and her face had changed. "You bought Blue Lantern?" she asked. "Yes. You from around here?" "No." The woman had pressed her lips together. "People in Harrow Bend don't like outsiders digging through old places." "I'm not digging," Mara had said. "I'm trying to live." The woman did not smile. Sometimes that's the same thing. A mechanic at the gas station was less careful. He was old, narrow-shouldered, with oil in the lines of his fingers. When Mara asked whether anyone in town could help restore the heating, he looked toward the diner and shook his head. "You didn't buy that place," he said. "You bought trouble." By evening, Mara understood that the warning had already traveled ahead of her. In the grocery store, people stopped talking when she entered. At the register, an elderly woman noticed the Blue Lantern keys in Mara's hand and asked, "You staying out there?" "For now." The woman glanced toward the window, toward the railroad tracks beyond town. "Don't go near Platform 9 after dark." Mara turned. "Why?" The woman left her basket on the floor and walked out without buying anything. That should have frightened Mara more than it did. Instead, It irritated something deep inside her, something raw and tired of being told where not to stand. She had been moved out of her apartment, moved out of her job, moved out of the life she had held together with tape and apologies. Maybe Harrow Bend could keep its warnings. She was staying. That night, Mara slept on the diner booth closest to the counter, wrapped in her coat. The heat did not work. The wind pressed against the glass, and every so often the old building clicked and settled around her. At 2:13 a.m., metal struck metal outside. Mara opened her eyes. The sound came again. Clang. Not the wind, not settling wood, something hard against the rail. She reached for the flashlight and stepped outside, boots crunching over gravel. The railroad tracks shone faintly under the moon. Beyond them stood the old platform, half swallowed by grass. Earlier that afternoon, the sign marked Platform 9 had been lying face down in the weeds. Now it stood upright, straight, cleaned of dirt. Mara's breath caught. She moved closer, the beam of her flashlight shaking despite her grip. A folded note had been wedged into a crack in the wooden post. She pulled it free. The handwriting was black and blocky. Go back before your name gets buried too. For several seconds, Mara heard nothing but her own pulse. Then anger came. Not brave anger, not movie anger, a smaller, uglier thing born from exhaustion. Get in line, she whispered. Everyone wanted her gone. Landlords, employers, debt collectors. Men on phones asking when she intended to make a payment. Caleb when she said no. Her own memories when she tried to sleep. Mara folded the note and put it in her coat pocket. By dawn, she had found a pry bar in the storage shed. Behind Platform 9, rotten boards covered a section of concrete half hidden by dead grass. She pulled one board loose, then another. Her palms blistered. Dirt slid into her boots. Once she stopped and laughed because she had no idea what she was doing. Only that stopping felt worse. By mid-morning, the boards gave way. Beneath them was the top of a narrow concrete staircase descending into darkness. Mara knelt at the first step. Something had been carved into the concrete, the letters shallow but clear, for Wexley only. Her surname stared back at her from a place she had never been. Mara reached for the flashlight. Before she could step down, an engine rolled to a stop near the diner. She turned. A dark vehicle sat in the gravel lot. A man stood beside it, mostly hidden by shadow and morning glare. He did not wave. He did not speak. He only watched her. Mara stood frozen beside the opening in the platform until the vehicle finally backed away and disappeared down the road. She did not go underground that day. She told herself it was because she needed tools, because she needed sleep, because no sensible woman crawled beneath an abandoned railroad platform alone. But that night, she shoved the heaviest table against the diner door. In the morning, the lock had been cut. The front door hung open. Inside, her boxes had been overturned, drawers yanked out, papers scattered, the jukebox shoved aside. Nothing was missing, not the kettle, not the cash in her coat pocket, not even the old radio sitting near the register. Only one new thing waited on the counter, a photograph. Mara picked it up with numb fingers. It showed a young man in a railroad work jacket, standing in front of Blue Lantern Diner years before the sign went dark. He had dark hair, tired eyes, and a half-smile Mara knew from the only childhood picture her mother had never thrown away. Elias Wexley, her father. Someone had drawn a red line across his face. Mara stared at it until the diner blurred around her. For most of her life, she had believed her father had run from them. Now, in the dead heart of a town that wanted her gone, someone was warning her that he had been buried there first. By noon, Mara Wexley had stopped pretending the photograph on the counter was only a photograph. She had turned it over 6 times, held it to the window, checked the faded edges, the old paper, the handwritten date on the back. Elias Wexley, Blue Lantern, 1999. Her father looked younger than she remembered him from the single picture her mother had kept hidden in a kitchen drawer. In this one, he stood in front of the diner wearing a Navy railroad jacket, one hand lifted as if someone had called his name. There was grease on his sleeve, a tired half-smile on his face, and a red line slashed across him like a sentence. Mara placed the photograph in her yellow notebook and went back outside. The opening beneath Platform 9 waited in the cold daylight. It looked less supernatural now and more dangerous. Broken boards, damp concrete, the smell of wet soil rising from below. Mara tied a scarf over her mouth, gripped the flashlight, and stepped down. The stairwell was narrow. Dirt pressed through cracks in the wall. At the bottom, a steel door hung slightly open, its lock rusted through. Inside was a room no property paper had mentioned. Shelves lined 3 walls. Cardboard boxes sat in careful rows. A railroad map covered one side of the room, red pins marking the old line between Harrow Bend, Kestrel Ridge Mine, and a creek named North Fork. There were metal filing cabinets, a tape recorder, a cracked desk lamp, and a wall calendar still turned to November 1999. Mara stood very still. This was not a hiding place for money. This was a hiding place for proof. She opened the first box, freight manifests, delivery logs, train numbers. At first, the pages meant nothing. Then she began seeing repeated phrases: sealed drums, night transfer, construction field, North Pit waste. Another box held medical names, not full files, just copied lists, workers, nearby families, illness dates, lung disease, skin lesions, kidney failure. A few names had red circles around them. Lorna Wexley was one of them. Mara lowered herself into the chair behind the desk. Her mother had told her the sickness came from bad luck, bad lungs, bad years at the packing plant. She had never mentioned a mine, never mentioned Harrow Bend, never mentioned Blue Lantern. Mara wanted to hate the room for existing. Then she found the box marked E. Wexley, Signal Maintenance. Inside were notebooks, photographs of half-buried barrels near a drainage ditch, copies of company memos and cassette tapes labeled in red ink. Mara picked one up and stared at her father's handwriting. For 23 years, Elias Wexley had been the man who left, the coward, the thief. The name, her mother said, only when anger made her careless. But the handwriting on these tapes did not feel like a man running away. It felt like a man counting evidence, because he knew he might not get a second chance. Mara took 3 folders, 2 tapes, and a photograph of Elias into town. The only person who did not immediately look away when she said her father's name was Ansel Crow. She found him behind a used bookstore with a bell that did not ring and shelves that smelled of dust and old rain. Ansel was 64, thin as a fence rail, with silver hair combed flat and greenish eyes behind metal-framed glasses. He listened without moving while Mara laid the documents on his desk. When she finished, he closed the top folder. "No," he said. Mara blinked. "No, I won't help you. You haven't even read all of it. I read enough 27 years ago." The words landed hard. Ansel took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Your father came to me. He said Sable Mineral was moving waste through the rail spur at night. Said people were getting sick. Said someone was changing shipment codes. You believed him? I believed the documents." Ansel looked at the boxes around him as if the books might overhear. "So I wrote about it. What happened? The paper got sued. My editor folded. My wife lost her job at the clinic. I was told my son's accident report could become public record in a very ugly way." His voice tightened. "Then Elias disappeared, and people decided it was easier to call him a thief than ask why a thief would leave behind evidence." Mara felt anger rise, but it had nowhere clean to go. So everyone just let him become the story they needed. Ansel's eyes softened with something worse than pity. "Truth doesn't die because there isn't proof, Miss Wexley. It dies because people are afraid of losing their house, their paycheck, their family." Mara gathered the documents with shaking hands. Outside, a black luxury truck waited across the street. By the time she reached Blue Lantern, the same truck was parked beside the diner. The man standing near the door looked as if cold weather had been invented for him. Gray wool coat, black turtleneck, polished shoes, silver hair brushed back perfectly. He removed one leather glove with slow care. "Mara Wexley," he said. "Vernon Sable." The name made the room beneath Platform 9 feel suddenly closer. "I don't remember inviting you." "No. But people rarely invite solutions until the problem has become expensive." He offered to buy Blue Lantern for 4 times what she had paid. Mara laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the number struck exactly where she was weakest. Her mother's bills, her dead SUV, Caleb's treatment, the empty space where a future should have been. "I'm not selling," she said. Vernon's expression stayed pleasant. "You were dismissed from emergency dispatch after a performance review. Your brother has outstanding debts. Your mother's medical account is already in collections. This building will not survive winter without money you do not have." Mara's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "You're not a hero, Mara. You're a poor young woman standing inside a rotting building. Then why are you here trying to buy it?" For the first time, his smile thinned. He put his glove back on. "Because rotting buildings sometimes collapse on the wrong people." He left without raising his voice. That evening, Caleb called. His voice came through ragged, breathless, half angry and half afraid. "What did you do?" Mara stood behind the counter, staring at the dark windows. "Caleb, Someone came to the center asking about me, asking where I went, asking if I talked to you. Her stomach dropped. Who? I don't know, Mara. Men with clean shoes don't introduce themselves to guys like me. His laugh broke in the middle. You always do this. You always try to fix broken things. I'm trying to understand what happened to Dad. Dad is gone. He may not have left us. Caleb went quiet. Then his voice returned colder. Some things break worse when you touch them. The line went dead. Mara did not cry. She went back beneath platform 9. She played the final tape on the recorder in the hidden room. At first, there was only static. Then Elias Wexley's voice filled the stale air. Lorna, if this reaches anyone, I did not run from you. I was told what would happen if I kept going. They named Mara's school. They named the road you take to work. I thought leaving would pull danger away from you. Mara pressed both hands over her mouth. I was wrong about many things, Elias continued. But I never stopped trying to come home. The tape clicked. From above came the sharp crackle of fire. Mara ran. Smoke pushed through the rear hall near the kitchen. Flames crawled up the old grease-stained wall behind the stove. Mara grabbed the extinguisher from under the counter and fought it until her arms burned, and white powder coated the floor like dirty snow. At last the fire coughed out. Mara stood there gasping. Through the smoke, black letters appeared on the wall. Someone had sprayed them there before the fire, waiting for heat and soot to make the message visible. Your father ran. You should too. Mara stared at the words until her fear hardened into something quieter. Then she walked to the counter, picked up Elias's tape, and held it against her chest. For the first time in her life, the word father did not feel like an absence. It felt like a warning someone had died trying to leave behind. By morning, the smoke had settled into every corner of Blue Lantern Diner. It clung to the cracked red stools, to Mara Wexley's denim jacket, to the yellow notebook she had left on the counter, and to the back of her throat each time she tried to breathe without remembering the words burned onto the kitchen wall. Your father ran. You should too. The sheriff's deputy arrived at 9. 17 with a paper cup of coffee in one hand and no urgency in his face. He walked through the kitchen, glanced at the blackened wall, tapped one scorched outlet with the end of his pen, and said, Old wiring. Mara stared at him. Someone spray-painted that message before the fire. Could have been kids who know my father's name. The deputy's jaw tightened, not with concern but with annoyance. Miss Wexley, this building is a fire hazard. You start poking around in condemned spaces. Things happen. That was how Harold Bend buried truth. Mara was beginning to understand. Not with shovels, with calm voices, with paperwork, with men who looked at a threat and called it weather. After he left, Mara locked the front door, then laughed once because the lock had already been cut. By noon, she called Nora Bellamy. The name had come from a small legal listing Ansel once mentioned before he decided courage was too expensive. Nora's office was 60 miles away, in a town large enough to have traffic lights and people who did not lower their voices when someone said Kestrel Ridge. Nora arrived just before dusk in a mud-splashed sedan. She was 33, composed in a charcoal blazer and low boots, with dark curls tied at the nape of her neck. She did not gasp at the burned wall. She did not tell Mara everything would be fine. She photographed the damage, examined the threat, then asked to see the documents. For nearly 2 hours, Nora read in silence. Mara sat across from her, watching the lawyer mark pages with green ink. It was the first time anyone had treated the papers like evidence instead of trouble. Finally, Nora closed the last folder. If these are real, she said, they may be enough to open an investigation. Mara felt something dangerously close to relief. Nora held up one hand. Enough to open one, not enough to win one, and definitely enough to make you a target. I already am. No, Nora said quietly. Right now you are an inconvenience. There is a difference. The next morning proved her right. A courier delivered a thick envelope from Sable Mineral Holdings. Inside was a legal demand accusing Mara of trespassing in a restricted railroad service structure, possessing confidential company materials, and interfering with private industrial records. She was ordered to surrender everything found beneath Platform 9 within 5 business days. If she refused, Sable would seek damages, injunctions, and immediate seizure of disputed materials. Mara read the letter twice, then pressed it flat on the counter beside her mother's unpaid medical bill. The two papers seemed to speak the same language. Pay, obey, disappear. Vernon Sable came in person that afternoon. He did not look at the burned kitchen. He did not ask if she was hurt. He removed his gloves with that slow, careful motion and placed a cream-colored folder on the counter. $1 million, he said. Mara did not touch the folder. Paid in full at closing, Vernon continued. All claims withdrawn. No litigation. No police reports. No debt collectors calling about your mother's account. No more men asking questions about your brother. The last sentence hit harder than the money. Mara looked up. You stay away from Caleb. I am offering you peace. You're offering to buy what my father hid. I am offering a poor woman a future before she mistakes stubbornness for virtue. Mara opened the folder. The number was real, too real. It sat on the page with clean black confidence. $1,000. For a moment she saw the life it could buy. A safe apartment, a working car, rehab for Caleb. Her mother's bills erased, a bed that did not smell like smoke, a winter she could survive. Her hand trembled over the signature line. Vernon watched her see it all. That was the cruelty of the offer. Not that it was evil, that it was useful. I'll give you 24 hours, he said. After he left, Mara found Ansel Crow waiting behind the diner near the service shed, his old cardigan buttoned wrong, his face pale. I'm sorry, he said before she spoke. Mara knew then. The betrayal did not arrive like a surprise. It arrived like a door quietly closing. You told him I was copying the files, Ansel's eyes filled, but he did not deny it. He has something on my boy, a drunk driving accident from years ago. Someone died. The report was buried. Vernon said he could unbury it. So you buried my father again. Ansel flinched. Then the old man lowered himself to his knees on the gravel. I was a coward when Elias disappeared, he whispered. And I was a coward again with you. Mara wanted to forgive him because he looked broken. She wanted to hurt him because he had helped break her. Get out, she said. He nodded once, slowly as if the words were fair. Then he stood and walked away without asking for mercy. Caleb arrived after dark. He looked thinner than the last time Mara had seen him, his gray hoodie hanging off his shoulders, his eyes restless and too bright. He stood in the doorway of the diner, as if he expected the building to accuse him too. Sign it, he said. Mara's chest tightened. You talk to Vernon. I talk to people who know what happens when you don't take the exit. He threatened you. I owe money, Mara, real money, to people who don't send legal letters. She stepped toward him. Then let me help you. With what? Burned walls and dead man tapes? Caleb laughed, but it cracked. You're not doing this for me. You're not even doing it for Mom. You're doing it because if Dad wasn't a coward, then maybe this family wasn't just one long failure. The words struck where he meant them to. Mara slapped him. The sound seemed to empty the room. Caleb touched his cheek, stunned. Mara reached for him at once, horrified by her own hand, but he backed away. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked past her, toward the burned kitchen. Some things don't get fixed because you love them hard enough. Then he left. Long after his footsteps faded, Mara stood alone in the diner, shaking. She did not go beneath Platform 9 that night. She could not bear another ghost. Instead, she sat beside the old jukebox and pushed at its loose chrome panel with the heel of her hand. Something clicked inside. A narrow compartment opened behind the song list. There was a folded letter tucked inside, yellowed and brittle. Her mother's handwriting covered the first page. Mara, if you found this, then I failed to keep you away from the truth. Mara sank to the floor. Lorna Wexley confessed everything in pencil. Elias had not abandoned them. He had been threatened. She had agreed to let Mara believe the worst because hate, she wrote, was safer than hope. A child who hated her father would not go looking for him. Then the letter changed. Your father may not have disappeared on the road. He may have died in the old transport tunnel beneath Kestrel Ridge. I never had proof. Only fear, and one man's warning before he vanished too. Mara could barely see the last line through tears. If you find Platform 9, don't only look for the truth about your father. Find where they hid him. The diner was silent around her. For the first time, Mara understood that Blue Lantern had never been her escape. It had been waiting for her like a question no one else dared to answer. Caleb Wexley did not apologize the next morning. He appeared in the doorway of Blue Lantern Diner, with his gray hoodie soaked from the rain, one cheek still faintly red where Mara had slapped him, and a look in his eyes that said he had not slept either. I know where the old tunnel is, he said. Mara stood behind the counter, Lorna's letter folded in her hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Nora Bellamy looked up from the legal files spread across the table. What tunnel? Caleb rubbed both hands over his face. There are people who sleep out near Kestrel Ridge when the shelters are full. I stayed there once. They said there's a sealed transport tunnel where the rail spur used to go into the mountain. Mara's first instinct was not trust. That hurt more than she expected. Caleb saw it anyway. I'm not asking you to believe me forever, he said. Just for tonight. They drove after dark because Caleb said fewer people watched the access road when the rain got heavy. Nora hated the plan but came anyway, carrying a waterproof folder, 2 flashlights, and the kind of silence that meant she was already preparing arguments for court and excuses for police. Kestrel Ridge rose black against the storm. The mine entrance was not a dramatic mouth in the mountain. It was a collapsed service road, a chain-link fence bent back by years of weather, and a concrete drainage cut hidden behind scrub pine. Caleb led them through mud and shale until they reached a steel door half buried under rock. On the door, under rust and mineral stains, was a faded symbol Mara had seen in Elias's files, North Transfer Route. Nora photographed it before Caleb pried the door open. The tunnel smelled of wet stone, iron, and something older that Mara did not want to name. Their flashlight beams moved over rails sunk into mud, broken pallets, and the round shadows of old drums shoved against one wall. Some were split open. Some still wore shipping codes. Mara read one aloud, her voice barely steady. KRM 17. Nora opened the folder and flipped to a copied manifest. Same code. Elias wasn't guessing. The deeper they walked, the quieter Caleb became. At the end of a narrow side passage, they found a chamber where part of the ceiling had caved in. Old wooden beams leaned at dangerous angles. A rusted work lamp lay smashed on the floor. Beside it sat a metal toolbox. Mara knelt. The initials were scratched into the lid. EW. Her breath left her all at once. Inside were signal pliers, a cracked roll of electrical tape, and a pocket watch with a dented silver case. Mara had seen that watch once before, in the photograph of Elias standing outside Blue Lantern, tucked into his vest pocket like something ordinary and safe. Caleb stepped back. Mara, she reached past the toolbox and touched a torn piece of navy fabric caught beneath a fallen beam. Railroad jacket fabric. For 23 years, Mara had imagined her father walking away down some road, choosing distance over them. Now she saw him here instead, underground, trapped in the dark with proof in his hands. The truth did not arrive like relief. It arrived like grief finally given a shape. Then the mountain shifted. A low crack ran above them, followed by the hard drop of stone into water. Nora shouted for them to move. Caleb grabbed the toolbox, but one of the rotten beams gave way and slammed across his leg. He screamed. Mara lunged toward him. Nora tried to lift the beam, but it would not move. Water began running faster through the chamber. Mara, Nora said breathless, we have to go. There are papers under there, Caleb gasped, pointing toward a crushed metal case half hidden behind the beam. Get them. Mara saw the case, saw the corner of old envelopes sealed in plastic. Maybe Elias's last proof. Maybe the thing that would tell the world exactly what happened here. Then Caleb made a sound she had not heard since he was a child waking from nightmares. Not anger, not sarcasm, fear. Mara stopped reaching for the case. She grabbed her brother under the arms. No, Caleb said through his teeth. Take the proof. I'm taking you. Together, Mara and Nora pulled until the beam shifted enough for Caleb to drag his leg free. He could barely stand. Mara wrapped his arm around her shoulders and hauled him toward the passage. Behind them, the chamber groaned. At the last second, Caleb twisted out of Mara's grip and snatched something from the floor near the toolbox. Caleb? He staggered back with Elias's small tape recorder clutched against his chest. Then the ceiling came down. They ran through mud, water, and dust, and burst into the rain just as the tunnel sealed itself behind them, with a sound like the mountain closing its mouth. Caleb collapsed beside the fence. Mara fell next to him, sobbing before she knew she had started. Not for the lost case, not even for Elias, for the brother she had almost hated because fear had made him hard to love. Caleb held out the tape recorder with shaking hands. I couldn't get the papers, he said, but I got his voice. By sunrise. Nora had already sent the copied files to 3 places, the State Environmental Office, a federal investigator she trusted, and a reporter outside Montana who had no reason to fear Sable Mineral Holdings. Ansel Crow arrived before noon. Mara did not invite him in. He stood in the doorway, thinner somehow, holding a folder of old contacts and a confession written in his own hand. I sent everything I had, he said. Names, dates, what Vernon used against me, what I helped hide. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Forgiveness did not come, but neither did hatred. Put it on the table, she said. That was enough. The investigation did not turn into a clean miracle. Vernon Sable was not dragged away in handcuffs. His attorneys denied everything. The company claimed the tunnel was unrelated. The drums were historical waste, and Elias Wexley had been an unstable former employee. But the old silence cracked. A retired rail worker came forward, then a nurse, then the daughter of a miner whose medical records matched Elias's lists. Projects near Kestrel Ridge were paused. Land files were reopened. Reporters came to Harrow Bend and asked questions the town had avoided for decades. And one morning, Ansel pinned his final article to the wall of Blue Lantern Diner. The headline read, "The Man Who Didn't Run." Months later, the diner reopened. Not perfect, not polished. The ceiling still showed patched seams. The counter still leaned slightly near the register. But the blue sign glowed again, bright against the Montana morning. Caleb poured coffee for the first customer. With a limp, he pretended not to notice. Nora sat near the window, warning Mara that the legal fight had only begun. Mara nodded. She no longer needed a perfect ending to believe she had done the right thing. Outside, she walked to Platform 9. The boards had been repaired. The entrance below was locked and marked as evidence now. Far across the valley, on the newer freight line, a train moved through the rain-washed light. Its whistle carried over Harrow Bend. Mara listened. Once, that sound had felt like a warning. Now it sounded like something buried finally moving again. Mara Wexley had bought Blue Lantern because she had nowhere else to go. But in the end, the abandoned diner taught her that people do not always need a new road. Sometimes they only need enough courage to step down into the place where the darkness began and turn the light back on. Sometimes the places we run to because we have nowhere else to go become the places where God quietly begins to rebuild us. Mara thought Blue Lantern was only an abandoned diner, a broken building beside forgotten tracks. But in that dark place, she found more than buried proof. She found courage. She found her father's truth. She found a reason to stand when fear, debt, shame, and grief all told her to give up. And maybe that is how miracles often happen in real life. Not always with thunder in the sky or a voice from heaven, but through one small light that refuses to go out, through one door that opens when every other door has closed, through one person who finally decides, I may be afraid, but I will not let fear choose my future. Maybe your Blue Lantern is not an old diner. Maybe it is a hospital bill you do not know how to pay, a family wound that still hurts, a job you lost, a dream that collapsed, or a season of life where you feel forgotten. But remember this. God can still place purpose inside broken places. He can still bring truth out of darkness. He can still turn what looked like an ending into the beginning of something stronger. Mara did not get a perfect ending, but she got a new beginning. And sometimes, that is the miracle. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories like this can remind people that their life is not over, subscribe to the channel for more. May God bless you, protect your family, strengthen your heart, and guide you through every dark tunnel until you find the light He has kept burning for you.